Hi, welcome back to another episode of Project Stargate. I'm your host, Mark Brenner. And today we have my co-host, Vincent Moore. With Vince, how you doing today, my brother?
I'm all right. How about yourself?
Better than I deserve. Today's episode of Project Stargate is Forbidden Knowledge with Kathleen Marden. One of our favorite guests, Kathleen Marden, will be with us tonight on this episode of Project Stargate. And she's going to talk about her new book and a whole lot of other stuff. So I'm real excited to have Kathy come back on the program. I bet you're pumped also.
Oh yeah, I'm really excited about this.
Because
Really.
I just finished her going over her book for like the second time uh, yesterday, and I always have when I read a book, I have to sit there and read, not just read the book, but I have to sit there and analyze and analyze and analyze. And her book, this book, her new book, Forbidden Knowledge, is a great book. But we'll get to that in a few minutes. At any rate, man. So how things coming along in your world? What you been up to, man?
Well, I do my usual. I'm, as you know, I'm a space junkie. So I have a lot of apps on my phone that always give me news about whatever's going on in space, whether it's rockets or planets or stars and even aliens and UFOs. So that's what my world has been consumed with a lot lately, as always. So I'm always ready to talk about that kind of stuff. Although, the people that have me around my family, they never want to hear any of this stuff. So I'm usually talking to myself, alone in my room. But now that I'm on here on Project Stargate, I can talk about it with you all. Like I can share it with you and our audience.
And
Uh,
that's what it's for, brother. That's
yeah.
exactly what it's for, man. Hey, you want to share with the listeners? You want to share with them what we were talking about on the phone earlier? I think you should.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. This would be a good way. This will be a great way to get into space stuff. So about recently, I'd say within the last 5 years, we have had not one but two objects that are interstellar objects pass through our solar system. Now, one of them got a little bit more notoriety. It's called Oumuamua, which is it is Hawaiian for visitor from a distant place. The other one is called Comet Borisov. So, what these objects are, uh, uh, I think scientists believe one of them is a comet, the other one is what scientists believe to be an asteroid. Oumuamua is believed to be an asteroid. Comet Borisov is a comet. And so the first one to arrive was Oumuamua in 2007. And then Borisov is a comet from, its trajectory is a comet from 2019. Well, the more interesting one is Oumuamua because it didn't behave like a comet does. Usually with comets, because of what they're made of like, ice and water and dust and other chemicals. They usually begin to melt the closer they get to the sun, and it becomes a process called outgassing. So
Right.
whenever you see a comet in the sky, it has the you see the actual comet itself and has this long tail. You could usually see these in the sky. There was one here recently. The name escapes me right now, but there was a comet uh, seen in the sky. And we talked about seeing Halley's Comet. I remember when I was a kid seeing Halley's Comet in the sky.
Yeah, 6 years old. I was 6 years old. Yeah, I was actually down in Mississippi when the darn thing flew over, and I remember my daddy. We were at my uncle's house, and early one morning, and he took us there to see Haley's Comet, and what a great memory that was.
Yeah, and I remember that. That was the first comet I ever saw. So, and then it had me looking in the sky ever since. So, anyway, Oumuamua was interesting because it didn't display any of that. It didn't have any outgassing. That was the first weird thing. The second weird thing was its shape. It was long and flat, and it was tumbling. It's tumbling in effect. And most comets tumble, but this was a little bit different. And the really the weirdest aspect of it is as it went around the sun, like as it used the gravity assist around the sun, um, it began to speed up, like it's going faster. Like it's actually about 5 times faster than any asteroid travels in the solar system in its orbit.
Now, Well, with that being said, so tell me if you think this is possible. I grew up watching Star Trek, and I know there's a lot of real science that a lot of that stuff's based on. I remember in one of the Star Trek films, they Captain Kirk steals a Klingon bird of prey, and he decides he has to go back in time to save some humpback whales. And then one of the way he decides to do it is he slingshots himself around a star, and it enables them to travel faster than the speed of light in some way. And I wonder if something else is like that's at play here with that comet. I wonder if maybe is it possible that like the gravity of the sun produced a sort of slingshot effect. I was thinking about that after we talked earlier.
Well, actually, okay, so there's actually a thing with that. I'll explain that in a minute. But generally, NASA or the ESA, whenever they send probes into the sky, like to Jupiter, like the Voyager missions, any other missions to go to study Venus or some things like that, they usually use the gravity of other planets in order to speed them up. It saves on fuel. It's called a gravity assist or a slingshot. The layman terms is a slingshot. So a lot of times, for example, if NASA had a probe and they wanted it to go really fast to say get to Pluto, they would use Jupiter's gravity. They'd send it on the edge of Jupiter, and it would speed it up and would actually give it an assist toward Pluto. Interestingly enough, a couple of things with that. There's still talk about Oumuamua because they aren't sure what it is. Like people have thought maybe it's an alien solar sail or a generational ship or just a regular old asteroid. They're not really sure what it is. Like they have yet to classify it. So
is it because of the shape of it, how it's moving, is it any of that? Is it because of any of that? What's your speculation?
Yeah, it's the shape. It's the how it reflects light because it's very dark. It's not bright like a lot of comets are. So it's probably not made of the same things as comets. The fact that it's sped up after it went around the sun, so they're not really sure why it's doing these things. So generally people will say it's an asteroid, but there's a pretty healthy debate going on within the astronomical community as to what it is, like what it really is, like the true nature of it. So of course you have your skeptics. They'll say it's just a regular asteroid, and you have people like us who have vivid imaginations. We say it might be more. But an interesting thing about it, speaking of gravity assist, there was a paper written recently about trying to catch up with it. Right now, it's actually still in the solar system right now. It's probably around Neptune's orbit, and it'll probably be in the solar system for another 3 years. Because in the solar system, it's huge. And it'll be in the solar system for another 3 years. And they actually have some this paper was detailing how they could use the gravity assist, like slingshots from a few other planets in order to catch up to it, catch up to it by 2040 or 2050. I haven't heard anything else other than that, but I thought that was really interesting. The other thing is that now, because we have these two interlopers that are coming into the solar system, astronomers speculate that there are probably more of these, several that come that we never really detect or we didn't detect in time. Like Oumuamua, we didn't detect it in time in order to be able to intercept it. But now that they launched the James Webb telescope, they're going to use that to actually, see if they can find out its true nature. The James Webb telescope, it launched pretty recently, and so the James Webb telescope actually is supposed to be designed to be able to see the light from exoplanets. Like it has these huge mirrors, and it's supposed to be able to find light from the exoplanets. So there are people that think that there's no reason why it shouldn't be able to at least get an image of Oumuamua. So we'll see. That sounds like it's going to be really interesting. I'd like to know the true nature of it.
Me too.
It sounds like it's really fascinating. Like I think it's opening up a new era of astronomy that we know that these things exist.
And that, my friend, is where you definitely come into play. And I look to forward to hearing more about what you discover with this. This is fascinating.
Oh, I'll definitely keep up with this. The more because we talk about a lot of unusual things, strangeness.
We do. We absolutely do. And our wives make fun of us to no end, don't they?
Right. And this is actually something I think is strange. It could be, like they say, it could be an asteroid, but what if it isn't? What if it's more than that? Who knows?
God only knows, man.
The mysteries of it actually lead to a lot of speculation and things like that. So I'd like to see what they come up with that.
The Sasquatch Encounter Brigade. Let's talk about them for a minute.
Sure.
So I spoke to Angie and Johnny Two Bear from Sasquatch Encounter Brigade, and I spoke to Johnny Pearson, who was with us. You weren't with us that night, but it was me and Greg a couple weeks ago. Anyway, they have their expedition out in Okefenokee. I believe it's this weekend. I think they're gearing up right now for it.
Really?
Yeah, the Okefenokee area is a prime lair for Sasquatch and other high strangeness.
Yes, I've heard a lot of things about the Okefenokee. Since I moved to Georgia, I've always wanted to go down there and check that out.
Well, they've invited us to go on an expedition in the future with them, so maybe we'll.
Oh, that sounds like it would be awesome.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I can't wait to. But Angie's going to come on the program at some point and talk about it. That'll be exciting. That'll be fun to have her.
Yeah, I can't wait for that.
Yeah, maybe I can talk Johnny to come back also. Maybe we'll get Johnny Two Bear back in here as well. Maybe we'll get them both. It'd be nice to hear two perspectives on this, because I have a feeling that they're going to come back. I think they're going to be very successful. I am very, very impressed with this group. I can't say enough wonderful things about all of them. I haven't met Captain Joe yet, but I'm hoping that'll happen really soon. Love to have him as a guest. Captain Joe, again, was an Army infantryman. He was a captain, and he was on a sniper range, and he had a Sasquatch encounter there on the range. And Johnny kind of spoke about it a little bit on the podcast, but it'd be nice to have him on and talk about that.
What kind of methodology are they using to do this research and this expedition? I mean, did they say, or is it?
We haven't really gotten that far into that, but I did tell them, I've got equipment. I've got the Spirit Box, S Box, that's been used, believe it or not, in investigating Sasquatch. I've got all the equipment needed to do a baseline, proper paranormal investigation of any kind. Even now we know, even UFOs, people are using this for UFOs. Let's talk about that for a minute. Speaking of which, good luck, guys. Everybody with the Sasquatch Encounter Brigade, I have faith in you. Go get them. I look forward to hearing about your experiences when you get back. And thank you. Thank you for being friends of the project. But anyway, Pam Nance, we had her on the program last year, and she's friends with our guest today. She's friends with Kathleen Marden. We had Pam on here, and she was talking about a guy named Chris Bledsoe that lives in Cape Fear, and we watched this video. And when I get done telling the baseline of this story, I'd like to get your thoughts of this video we watched. Is that cool?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so for the listeners who aren't familiar or who have missed our podcast last year with Pam Nance, so she's an archaeologist, anthropologist, and a paranormal investigator / parapsychologist. She's a little bit of all that. She's got degrees in the first two. So she's very qualified to investigate anomalous phenomenon. No doubt in my mind. She's brilliant. And she's friends with Kathleen Marden. I think, if memory serves me correctly, I think they met through Stanton Friedman, the nuclear physicist. I think they met through him. I'll have to ask Kathy later.
Yeah, I believe she mentioned that in her book.
Yeah. So Kathy, and anyway, so they had an idea that they would investigate a UFO case with contact that involves contact with non-human entities using conventional paranormal equipment and methodology, what people would use to investigate other types of paranormal stuff like hauntings and stuff like that. They had the K2, they had all these lots of cameras, and what they caught on video with their surveillance cameras was amazing. They caught 3 entities, non-human entities. Can you, based on I remember it made quite an impression on you. Can you tell me what your thoughts were on that video?
Well, there were 3 in particular that I thought were really fascinating. I would like to know more about. I would like to know, like, one of these days, if we can actually get them on, I would like to know more about what their thoughts on the true nature of it. But in my opinion, the one of them, there are 2 of them in particular that were really compelling. So there was one that looked like a figure in a black suit, and it had it looked like it to me. It looked like it had a helmet on. I always remember saying that it looked like I don't know, the group Devo. It looked like that type of helmet, but it was gold. Like it had a light coming out of it.
It did, and I couldn't tell if those were ears or if that was some kind of apparatus this entity was wearing.
Right, and I could clearly see that it was a humanoid figure. Like, it looked like it was a humanoid figure standing with how you clasp your hands behind your back, just standing there. I thought that was really fascinating, and it was very clear, because sometimes when you're doing this type of research, you're looking at these pictures. Sometimes you can't really make out what they're talking about. Like, sometimes you're like, I'm not really sure that's what I see, but in this instance, I could clearly see that it's a humanoid figure with something glowing around their head. That it was like a light out of their head. The second figure looked like, to me, it looked like ectoplasm. Like, it looked like, how you see pictures of ectoplasm. It looked like that, but it had like some
kind
type
of misty looking.
Well, yeah, ectoplasm looks kind of soupy.
Yeah, kind of misty, I've described it before as like a half soup, half mist type concoction looking stuff.
Right, and it had this blue glowing. I'm not sure what I would call that. It was glowing blue. I guess I'd call it for lack of a better term, ectoluminescence. I guess that's what I would call it. But it was something glowing. It looked like inside of it to me. I thought that was really compelling too. But the thing about it is that picture was pretty clear also. Now the third one, I wasn't entirely sure about it, but it looked like it was some type of I don't know, a cross between I guess I could say looked like a little monkey with lobster claws sitting.
That's exactly what I saw. I mean, this little guy looked like he was sitting on a branch of this big tree where Chris Bledsoe and his family were having all these experiences. And at any rate, it was an amazing. I mean, it was just kind of sitting back there and whatnot, and it was leaning back, and it looked like its feet looked like claws. But that was an incredible video, man. Our guest today, Kathleen Marden. You haven't met Kathleen yet formally, but everybody who's listened to our program last year will remember Kathleen Marden from last year. She was the author of Extraterrestrial Contact: What to Do When You're Abducted, and she's coming back tonight to discuss her new book, Forbidden Knowledge. And it's going to be a really fascinating interview. But anyways, let's go ahead. Without further ado, we'll go ahead and bring her on right now. Let's go ahead and bring her in here real quick. All right. This is going to be a really, really good program. Hey, Kathy, welcome to Project Stargate.
Oh, thanks. Great to be back with you.
Hi, Kathy. Welcome.
Hello, Vince.
Nice.
Nice to be with you.
It's very nice to have you back, Miss Kathy. And I'm really excited about your new book. We just got done reading it, and looking forward to sharing that with our listeners here in just a moment. But before we get into that, actually, I kind of had a we've spoken a little bit about before with your friend Pam Nance about the Chris Bledsoe investigation. Before we get into talking about your new book, I just wanted to make a comment, and I want to encourage all of our listeners to check out this video when they get a chance. It's actually on, I think it's on Pam's website, I think, but
yes.
You actually were pretty involved with the Chris Bledsoe investigation.
Yes, I investigated it. I did the hypnosis sessions with Pam and Ashley, and I did a frame-by-frame analysis on the video.
And that video, it was actually verified by several professionals that it was on point and not fraudulent. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true.
But at any rate, really enjoyed your book. Her book is called Forbidden Knowledge, and I cannot recommend it enough. It's basically the culmination of your life experiences and your research. The first part of the book was very interesting. You've talked a lot in the past about your family history, and you kind of went into more detail in the first part of this book. Can you tell us a little bit about that in detail?
Yes. How far back do you want me to go?
Back to the point where you started having you and your family members, like your aunt and uncles and your cousins and your mom and people, started having these experiences.
Okay. I don't know about the entire family, but my aunt and uncle had an experience when I was 13 years old in 1961. And that was my first introduction to UFOs. But then I learned on September 19, 1961, the 20th actually, when Betty called my mother, who was her sister, that my mother had an encounter with another aunt back in 1957, I believe it was. And they were just on a regular Friday night grocery shopping trip on their way home after dark. And there was a huge, like a mothership, just hovering over a field, and there were smaller craft flying around it. They stopped at a home where they knew the people. The people went out and they saw it as well. There was a NICAP report made. I don't know if it was then or if it was later, but John G. Fuller included that in his book, Incident at Exeter, as well. So it's a documented sighting.
Wow. How far back have you guys recorded, as far as you can tell, how far back do you think that your generational experiences, how far back do you think they go with your family?
I suspect that they go back at least to my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. I could be incorrect about that because it was something that the family didn't want to discuss. I know that Dr. James Harder from APRO, who was also a professor at University of California, Berkeley, hypnotized several people in the family as they were investigating this contact that I had, that my mother had. And my mother did say something to me about my grandmother and craft that came down low in the daytime behind her house. And so there's a possibility there. Her family history is Native American and English.
Wow. That's I've noticed a trend in the contact and experiencers. there's a lot of people who have a Native American descent that seem to have these experiences. At least that's what I've gathered.
Yes, Native Americans and Celts as well. Among the Native American population, in the studies that I worked on, 2 of them were with PhD academics, and with about 5,000 individuals between the 3 studies I've worked on to identify commonalities among experiencers. It was significantly elevated among Native Americans.
That's what it seems like. I mean, you guys have gotten this down to a science. I mean, literally a science, down to percentages by blood type, ethnic backgrounds. I mean, the list goes on. You guys have people like you and Daryl Sims and others like you have really gone out there and did your homework.
And Ray Hernandez too.
Yeah, very
Don
cool.
C. Don Derry.
Dr. Jacobs, definitely, he's great too. But at any rate, what's a good place to start with your book? I know we got the Council of 8. We got with Jacques. Did I pronounce that right? Jacques.
Jacques, yes.
Yes.
Zark. I call him Zark, but it's spelled Jark for some reason. But I call him Zark.
Right. Yeah, I noticed in the book it was spelt. You kind of sounded it out for us, especially for me. Thank you. But yeah, I know that there's the Council of 8, and can you tell us a little bit about Kevin and what led up to you meeting Kevin, and tell us a little bit about that situation and what led to you discovering the Council of 8?
I would be happy to. Let me first say that I was a nuts and bolts researcher for at least 21 years. I did not believe that there was anything more to it except for aberrant human perception. But then in 2011, when I did my first study on experiencers, I discovered that most experiencers, the vast majority, have seen light orbs that seem to be conscious orbs in their own homes, that there is a sensation of something unseen walking on the bed, experiences that I've had myself but was attempting to deny because of my scientific training in college, and especially in psychology. And psychologists are the one group of academics who are least likely to accept the reality of UFO visitation, statistically. So I received information in the book Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience. I wrote a chapter on Admiral, or he was actually a rear admiral, but we called him Admiral Herbert Knowles. And Betty told me about him, and I decided to do further research on him and found him mentioned in one of Jacques Vallée's books, and in association with Frances Swan, a woman from Maine who was communicating, she thought, with extraterrestrials, and also with Wilbert Smith, who was the Canadian government's UFO guy and a brilliant engineer. He had many patents.
I wonder if she was related to Ingo Swan, the telekinetic guy.
Yeah, I really don't.
Or not the telekinetic guy, the remote viewer. Sorry.
Yes, they had the same last name, and this can run in families as well, I've learned from my research.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so anyway, I received a thick packet of information from Admiral Knowles' granddaughter. I'd put out the word on the networks in writing, that also, and at conferences, that I was looking for more information about him. I had been to Maine and couldn't find the family. So his granddaughter approached me and handed me a thick packet of files. And it was the correspondence files between him and Wilbert Smith, and also information about Frances Swan. And I read over it and I thought, oh, this is about channeling. I'm not going to get into that. You know, when you think about channelers, when you're a nuts and bolts researcher, it's something that is simply taboo. You could just destroy your reputation.
Right.
But I pulled, as we moved along in our knowledge regarding consciousness and the new focus on consciousness, I pulled that packet out again, and I started reading the letters between Admiral Knowles and Wilbert Smith. And this experiment took place back in 1954. And let me say that the FBI was interested in this. I have the FBI files, the CIA was, the Air Force, the Navy. So there was definitely government interest. When Admiral Knowles received the information from Frances Swan that she had allegedly received from ETs, he realized, being a well-educated man himself, that the files contained knowledge, scientific knowledge, far beyond Frances Swan's level of education. And so he was so impressed by this and by the impact that this could potentially have on the world and national security. He gave a copy of that packet to Margaret Chase Smith, who was the senator, U.S. senator from Maine, and it went to Dwight Eisenhower.
Wow.
And this brought a top brass from Washington up to Admiral Knowles' house. And I have a letter in my possession that Helen Knowles wrote to my Aunt Betty Hill about that weekend. And what she said is that they were up there, that they met Frances Swan, they attempted to talk with these ETs. When they realized that it was not through conventional means, they packed up and went home, and Helen Knowles said, and I was sick of making sandwiches for that group that weekend. And so, I thought, oh, well, gee, unconventional, the government lost interest. Then I looked further, and I discovered that the government did not lose interest in this, that actually there was a Commander Larson from the Navy who learned how to communicate with these ETs too. And I learned that he was going out to California to do an experiment, and then that made my the gears in my brain work, and I was saying to myself, was this the alleged meeting between Dwight Eisenhower and ETs? And I don't know the answer to that question, but still the time frame seems right. And then, there was so much information, including the fact that this was confidential.
Right.
It wasn't disseminated elsewhere. And that they were looking for scientific evidence that this was real. And they did receive the scientific evidence to confirm that what Frances Swan was saying was true. And it had messages about how this group of ETs who were in our solar system in a gigantic craft that held motherships and smaller craft called bells was here, and they were from an older civilization than us, and that they were offering their assistance to us. They had concerns about our use of nuclear weapons. They said that the use of nuclear weapons, the detonation of thermonuclear weapons, tore into the dimensions, through the veils between the dimensions, and caused damage to other dimensions as well. And so then I was saying to myself, what do you mean dimensions? Are they from other dimensions here, or are they from other dimensions on other planets. And so I was curious about that. And also all of the information that Admiral Knowles and Wilbert Smith received from Francis Swan and the government interest. So that gave me courage to participate in this experiment with Kevin Briggs. I met Kevin after the MUFON symposium in Orlando, Florida in 2016. I was speaking that year. I didn't meet him at the symposium. He met one of my co-researchers, Dr. Melanie Barton-Bragg, who was a psychotherapist and a minister, and Denise Stoner. He had attended her experiencer workshop.
Hi, Denise, by the way. Hi.
And
Love
he
Denise.
said, she's a great
She is.
investigator and researcher. It's been my pleasure to work with her for, oh my gosh, at least 11 years now or more, maybe 12. But anyway, they met Kevin, and Kevin said that he hadn't really wanted to go to that symposium because of the cost. It was going to cost him a lot of money, but that he was instructed to do so by this council. So at the beginning, especially Denise and I, as we spoke about this, said, well, we're going to go in as being highly skeptical. We're not going to state that, but that's going to be what we're going to do, because the history of channeling has a terrible reputation. Also, was this, Kevin is British, is this a man who is just trying to pull one over on us for fame or fortune or whatever he might be trying to seek, launching off our backs? Or is there something real? Or is he delusional?
People assume, I know a lot of people assume just because you've been on TV a time or two that you've got like wheelbarrows full of money. So yeah, I hear you. Sometimes, yeah. but that didn't really turn out to be the case here at all. Tell us what happened.
No, actually, when I met Kevin and had the opportunity to speak with him, he talked to me about how when he was 8 years old, he was in the bath in England, and these two very large human types just materialized in front of him and frightened him half to death. And a year later, one of them that he calls Ort came back as a conscious orb, stayed with him for a week, and taught him how to astral travel, and began to teach him about consciousness. And so I actually did hypnosis with Kevin because he had a missing time event when he was 14 years old. He was a paper boy in England, and he saw a craft in a park as he was delivering papers early one morning. He was taken to craft. He had a missing time event, and under hypnosis, he was taken onto the craft. He was introduced to that Council of Eight, and he was shown something that was laid out on a very large screen. And so I became interested, particularly when he sent me scientific information from this Zark, who is supposedly a gray scientist. You might say a Zeta scientist. And, so my background's in social science. I did take a class in physics and a class in chemistry, philosophy of science, those kinds of things, but I was in no position to evaluate that information.
Right.
I sent it to Stanton Friedman. It was about element 115 and how to stabilize it. And Stanton just wrote back and said, we haven't stabilized element 115. Well, that wasn't the question. I knew we hadn't stabilized it. It had has a very, very short half-life. But these were the
It's
instructions on.
less than a second, isn't it? It's like way less than a second.
Yes, way
Yeah.
less than a second. Right. And, so then I gave them the information to another scientist, but he didn't get back to me. And I know that Kevin sent it out to other scientists as well. So we finally came to the point where Kevin invited Melanie and Denise and I to meet at his home once a month, and just to participate in this secret experiment, and to try to determine ourselves if this was real, and to learn from it if we thought that it was.
I think this is a good spot to stop for a Q&A before the end of the segment. Is that okay, Miss Kathy?
Absolutely, yes.
So, Vince, I think I'll let you take this first round of Q&A. Go ahead, Vince.
So I remember in reading, talking about element 115. Is this the same 115 that Bob Lazar talks about?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I thought that might be what it is. So, what I gather though from what you're saying, as we're finding out more about quantum physics and how these things intersect, do you see that maybe scientists are beginning maybe to accept some of these things? Some of these things that you talk about and that you report, are they slowly coming along, or is this something that's going to take a little while to chip away with? Because I know scientists, they need the evidence, and they need it to the T, all T's crossed and I's dotted. So do you think that they're beginning to loosen up though, as they're finding the things that you're talking about is matching what they're finding in their research?
I have known several, I should say, PhD scientists in physics, in social science, who have had an interest in this for many years, and who have been studying this secretly. And now they're retired, and they are engaging in the study of consciousness on a very large scale through Ray Hernandez's new group. And I find it to be extraordinarily exciting. Also, government scientists who are looking into all of this, particularly in reference to the Skinwalker Ranch, and also the Tic Tac and all of the different craft seen off the both east and west coasts.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Vince.
So it's because I've often known that scientists studying this it's kind of a death to your career if you even talk about this out loud. But
yes.
Yep. As we have things like UFO disclosure and advances in quantum physics, it seems to be less so. So when you were talking about the reveal in your book, and I know you may get into this a little bit later, but do you think this is part of it? Is this part of what that's supposed to be? Something that happens slowly to pull us all into this together?
Well, the ETs have offered their assistance to us, and they are interested in a reveal at this time, but they don't want to impose it on us unless our governments are willing to cooperate. Kevin has been attempting to set up a meeting at the UN between members of the United Nations and the Council of Eight. He attempted this in 2020 and was not able to accomplish this. And he's still attempting to do this. There are people all over the world now that I'm aware of who are performing CE5 contact experiments, and many are successful, and some are actually seeing the ETs and communicating telepathically with them. So the ETs say if our governments, and they say that they've gone to all of our governments and heads of large businesses That's what they said, to attempt to offer their assistance to save our planet, and that no one was interested. So they say that now they've started from the bottom up, and eventually we'll reach a tipping point where everyone will be aware that this is real.
Wow. It's pretty fascinating, pretty deep stuff. This is probably the deepest book I've read of yours yet. Good questions, Vince. Yeah. Why don't we go to a break? But when we come back, I want to hear what happens next with Kevin and how you scored a meeting with the Council of Eight and what that means, what that means for reality and everything. But anyways, when we come back, we'll talk about that. You're listening to Project Stargate with Kathleen Marden. We'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to Project Stargate. I'm your host, Mark Brenner, and we're back here with my co-host, Vincent, and our guest, Kathleen Marden. Welcome back, guys.
Thank you. Great to be back.
We were talking before, by the way, I just wanted to tell you, I listen to Linda Moulton Howe a lot on Earth File. I think it was called Earth Files. Is that her show? Mm-hmm. I listen to her and I've seen her a lot. And when I listen to her, I really enjoy it. She's a good talker. She's a good speaker. She's very good at articulating information. And I've noticed, I can't help but notice you kind of share that trait. It's just really, really cool listening to you talk.
Well, thank you. And Linda was sort of a mentor to me when I began speaking on the stage, and she would always come up and say, "You're clear as a bell." She really values that. Well,
like my friend Vince here, she's a great journalist. She tells you how it is. You know, she gives the facts, and I like it. I'm totally. I wish we had more journalists out there like that instead of giving their spin on things. But at any rate, you're just meeting Kevin when we left off, and things started getting really. I think you guys might have gotten more than you bargained for. Tell what happened.
Yes, actually, we were able to measure a significant temperature increase in the room when these entities came in one at a time to introduce themselves. And let me say, we could not see them, but we measured in temperature increase. Those who are fifth and sixth dimensional beings, according to them, had a temperature increase in the room by more than 5 degrees Fahrenheit. When the ninth dimensionals came in, it was more than 8 degrees Fahrenheit. So significant temperature increase. Also, the higher the vibration of the individual, and when I talk vibration, I'm talking about from third to fifth to sixth and all the way up to ninth, the stronger the electrical tingling we felt in our bodies.
Really?
Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
At the first meeting with them, where we met all of them, they said that they wanted to show us a craft, that to show us so that we would believe they were who they said they were. And so they began with Melanie, but there was special interest in me by this gray called Zark. And that very weekend, my husband and I were in his truck going to Disney World because our grandson from Boston, who sings in the Boston Children's Choral group, was performing at Disney. So we're just riding along, and all of a sudden, I felt Zark come in, very, very strong.
Surprise, surprise, surprise.
Yes, he communicated with me telepathically. And I remember I forgot a lot about what we discussed, but fortunately I was writing it down. And I was asking him if he was dead, if he was a human spirit, you know, what was going on here. And he said no. And so then I asked him about burying their dead, or what they did with their dead. And it was sort of like, well, not like you do, that sort of thing. And so, you know, it's a little frightening at first when you have this kind of experience. But I'm a curious person. I wanted to know. And I knew that I faced consequences. For a long time, I wondered, are these negative interdimensionals, things that we might refer to as demons who are deceiving us? I know that in religious dogma, that's a major theme. And I grew up Catholic, so, you know, it was definitely a consideration, but they weren't. I discovered that there was nothing demonic about them. And as time went on, first Melanie was shown a craft and had telepathic communication with one of these entities, a ninth dimensional that calls herself Shiva.
Shiva.
Sheeva, though, not Shiva, like the Indian god.
That's what I wanted to clarify.
Yes. There was also Ra. What do you think of the Egyptian god, sun god?
Right.
And it's R-A-H. I was really perplexed by this. Was this deception? And they didn't think that I would know, or what? Where did these names come from? But Shiva is a healer. And Shiva healed Melanie, who was ill. And she healed me when I was ill one time. So everything was positive about this. Denise was also shown a craft. She did not remember having telepathic communication with that entity, but since then she has also communicated with Shiva and knows what she looks like. She reminds her of an angel. But Shiva and Ra say that they no longer have physical bodies, that they at one time did, thousands of years ago, but now they have elevated to a level of consciousness where they no longer need physical bodies, but they're still here in this quadrant of our galaxy, sort of overseeing things.
I wanted to interject something really quick, Kathy, if you don't mind. Something you just really caught my attention. You described the being Shiva as looking kind of like an angel. That correlates with another experience with one of our recent guests, Ron Felber, the author. In the Mojave incident, they described an apparition of what looked like what they called an angel. Mm-hmm. Is this a common theme? Have we had other angelic-like beings or angel encounters during CE4 experiences? Have you seen this before?
Well, I also saw Shiva as an angel. She was translucent, but I saw what appeared to be wings. And in these CE5 experiments, I can tell you that Chris Bledsoe has had this experience with a Marian kind of apparition, divine feminine, a lady dressed in a long white robe, blonde hair, twice, and she has given him prophecy. There is a man in Europe who had photographed what appeared to be another Marian apparition. Francis Swan, back in 1954, was having Jesus appear. So what is this? You know, is this something different from extraterrestrials? Or are they extraterrestrials? It becomes very confusing. And
where do you draw the line? Yeah.
It opens a can of worms for nuts and bolts investigators, such as myself, for so many years, because this involves the interdimensional, It involves religion. There are so many considerations that we have to think about that you don't have to think about if all you're looking for is physical evidence of a craft.
Yeah, Vince, there we go again with there's another example of some kind of religious theme in some of these experiences. I find that fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually gonna I guess add to that or ask really. It seems like we often talk about how sometimes alien abductions sound demonic, possession or demonic, harassment, things like that. Do you also find that's the case too? Like, are you beginning to take a look at whenever you hear about something that might be demonic? Do you begin to rethink that? In your research as you've researched over the years now.
I do rethink that, and I actually did an experiment where I got burned. I was working with a man who was being taken by draconian reptilians to an underground base, and horrific things were happening there. And it bothered me terribly, but I was trying to help him and also attempting to find out if this was real. He was a professional man. He was well educated. He did not have a history of psychiatric illness, but he swore that this was happening to him. And he was such a kind and gentle man, but he was becoming ill as all of this was happening. And what happened is that he told me something that was so horrific that it caused me to experience horror, which lowered my vibrational frequency. I felt that tingling. I have a wonderful feeling of like tingling in my body. It made it escape. It left my body. It was either through the heart chakra or the solar plexus. I'm not sure. It happened so suddenly. And what I felt then was like a dark cloud had descended on me.
Ooh.
I normally sleep well. I was having sleep problems. I began to ache. My body began to hurt. I began to feel ill, just like this man. And then over time, I tried to get rid of it myself through all of the religious means that I know of, and it wouldn't leave, probably because I was upset and frightened. I know now that you have to condition yourself to throw love at this thing, because it's going to run away from love. It feeds off fear. It feeds off loathing. It feeds off illness, pain.
Sounds diabolical.
Yes, it was diabolical. And finally, Melanie, Dr. Melanie, who knows how to remove these things, was going to drive the 3 hours to my home to help me, but it was going to take her a couple of weeks. But this thing advised me to kill myself.
Oh my
and
goodness.
I said, that is the end of this. This is going to end right now. I called up Kevin Briggs and I said, Kevin, this has happened to me. I know the Council of 8 said that they would protect me, but I really need help with this. And he said, I'll talk to Ra immediately. He did. It was gone when I woke up the next morning.
That's pretty striking. Good question, Vince.
Yes, that's pretty good evidence to me that the Council of 8 is benevolent and real, whoever they are.
Yeah.
But I would say then, in your opinion, then what do the malevolent beings want? Because what is it that the alien abductions where people are harmed or where they have traumatic experiences? What do they want? Is there any indication of what they want at all?
They want to feed off human fear. They absorb these negative emotions. They breathe them in. They care little about humans. They take what they want. It's a small percentage, and the Council of 8 told us that they try to protect us from the power of these others. But I know that there has been so much negativity, so much just grief in the collective consciousness of this world, from the plague, from wars, from hatred by one group toward another, that it's not surprising that I've learned that these negative ones are thriving in this, and that the paranormal clergy is busier than ever trying to remove these things. And those, I suspect, are those negative hitchhikers that went home on the scientists and the investigators, the government workers from the Skinwalker Ranch. I know that there was a positive element there too, but there were also negative ones who caused these people to experience terror. It's when you feel terror that they can attach to you. And I've talked to mothers of people who were in the wars in the Middle East, who believe that they have extraterrestrials in their lives now. And I suspect that it's these negatives, because in the horrors of war, they would have a banquet. There are so many people that they could attach to and grow.
And then there's the possibility, I'd like to interject this. There's also, I bet apparently someone is, from my understanding, has done some research on some people coming home from the Middle East. And being a vet, me and Vince both are being veterans, we can understand this to a degree for sure. But there is some evidence to suggest that the jinn might be involved with this to some degree.
Yes,
what do you think
the
about
jinn
that?
Is pretty much what we have too, just by a different name.
Right. But it's all, I think it's relative. It could be an issue of relativity. Vince and I were talking about this yesterday. What if relativity doesn't just apply to gravity and physics and stuff like that? What if everything's reality is relative? If everything's relative in reality, just as a whole? What if, the way I perceive things, the way you're perceiving things, the way Vince is perceiving things is slightly different, or we might be looking at the same thing, but it might be a different perception.
Yes, that's true. So it's really important to compare notes with others who are having the same experience. And I do want to add, I don't want to just give people this information and not tell them how to stop this from happening.
Yes.
If you go to my website at Kathleen-Marden, M-A-R-D-E-N, I have 2 articles on negative spiritual attachment. And in one of them, it gives instructions on how to protect yourself, the meditations that you need to do to protect yourself, to get rid of these attachments that want to feed off people. And
now, as far as MUFON goes, what are the work you do when you're talking about this other type of paranormal phenomena? Because I know I've met a lot of MUFON investigators, and I would say about half the ones I've met were nuts and bolts, kind of like the old NICAP style of approach to it. And then some of the other people I've met were a little bit more liberal minded, like we are, and they're open to other possibilities besides the extraterrestrial hypothesis. How do you think? From your perspective, how is Florida MUFON, at least Florida MUFON? How are they evolving with this train of thought, or is it kind of hit or miss with that?
I'm not really sure about that. I was the Mutual UFO Network's director of experiencer research for, 10 years. And I stepped down a year ago when my husband became ill. And so we had kind of a unique group. We were different from the traditional investigators with MUFON, although everyone in the group was a field investigator, and when they did an investigation, they had to follow MUFON's guidelines. But these were the intellectual part of MUFON. We had 2 psychiatrists, several PhDs, a couple of MDs in the group, going down to being just normal, everyday working people. But all had an interest in this and learning about it without restriction. Now, just recently, they have taken, it's now called the Experiencer Resource Team, and placed it as a little bubble off the side of the case management system instead of as a separate arm. And so the rules have changed somewhat. I'm not really certain what this is going to mean, but I do not believe that MUFON is going to open its mind and look into this more esoteric side of this information, like we and the government are looking into. It freaks out a lot of nuts and bolts investigators, and MUFON has many investigators who are fairly new to the topic. They decide they want to become field investigators, and they are just trained to collect physical evidence. And, I really think that you have to be quite advanced in your level of knowledge to have an interest in and curiosity in the things that we are interested in.
Absolutely. Vince and I have had many, many deep conversations about what I call, for lack of a better term, the theory of everything. And what the thing that keeps coming up, and most of the time it's unintentional, and maybe Vince will comment on this in just a second. But it doesn't seem to me like it's, when I look at the big picture of ufology, parapsychology, cryptozoology, I see so much overlay. I cannot deny it. Some people say I'm nuts when I say this, but the UFO encrypted fields, most of it is very paranormal in nature. And Vince, like I said, Vince and I, we've talked about this a lot, and Vince kind of feels the same way.
Yeah, I think when you get, I've been a trained journalist, but then I'm also sort of an astronomy geek. So I get into like quantum physics and multiverse theory, and all of those things seem to overlap in some way. We're now, instead of talking about just ghosts, we're beginning to talk about interdimensional beings and things like that. So it seems to me that a lot of these things are overlapping. So I wonder. I guess I often wonder why the people don't really see that in the big picture. It just seems like they just miss it in the big picture, in my opinion. But every time we have this conversation, it always goes back to the same thing. We have the same things that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I want to give an example, and I want to get your thoughts on this, Kathleen. So the one thing I have noticed over the years, and I've been out in the field a few times in the past, periodically. Greg and I, we went out and we went and looked at a couple places years ago. We had a lot of success too, by the way. And there's a lot of common threads with all this different types of paranormal phenomenon, whether it's UFOs or poltergeist activity, anything that involves PK. And what I'm seeing very consistently is for example, when you have a poltergeist situation, I'm sure you've noticed that usually the room gets really cold, or cold in a very small area. I noticed that sometimes some of the Nimitz photo videos of that UFO, that object of whatever it was, it looked like it was really cold. The object itself, but it was really warm around it. Mm-hmm. The other thing, and this is huge. Now, this goes back. I had to reference your other book, Extraterrestrial Contact, the one that we talked about last time.
Yes.
And I've referenced this book a lot, and I really appreciate it. But what I see, this is huge. when you have a poltergeist situation, it gets one of the things that I see very commonly is your batteries get drained. There's electronic interference. That's the key, is electronic interference.
Mhm.
Let's go to a UFO close encounter situation. I see that happening. I see vehicles stop. They're just dying. I see cell phone batteries dying. What do you think about that?
Yes, cameras shut down. Even in Pam Nance's case, that camera ran for only a few seconds to capture that video. There's something there that is draining that energy. There's a very powerful electromagnetic component to all of this. Perhaps that's what it is doing it. I've also noticed that it has an impact on my memory, depending upon how strong it is.
Absolutely. Vince, what are your, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, on the EMF. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, it's kind of like I have often wondered about the more, things vibrate in a certain way, and the more they vibrate, the more energy it takes. And I've often wondered if that was connected, if that was something that, things take energy to run. Anything takes energy to run. And I wonder if if you have a being that's in a higher dimension and they vibrate differently, if it does change things in I guess in our reality. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's probably true. I know that Dr. Melanie, when she was at the first meeting with Kevin where we met the Council of Eight, her cell phone ended up being fried. And she took it in for repair, and they said, "We have never seen anything like this before. How did this happen?" And she didn't want to tell them how it happened. But yeah, it does do that. In a case where Denise Stoner was abducted when we were together, and maybe me, I might have been with her, possibly. Her phone was dead. Her insulin pump went dead as well, even though they were fully charged. It's common. And one other thing that overlaps is that in the Omega studies that were done by Kenneth Ring and Christopher Rosen at the University of Connecticut on near-death experiencers and UFO contact experiencers, they found that they had the same characteristics.
Yes, they are similar.
Including this electromagnetic interference in their homes.
Now, I didn't know that. Now, I know that when near-death experiencers come back, they do have either enhanced or newfound psychic abilities. That's fascinating. I didn't know that, though.
Yes, I read it, and it's in one of my books. So I was very interested in this paranormal overlay of whatever it is, this physical part of it. And the only difference between the near-death experiencers and the abductee group that they had was that the abductee group had a higher level of trauma in their past on their tests than the near-death experiencers. And when my aunt and uncle, Betty and Barney Hill, had their experience, something went home with them. There were lights that were blinking. There were clocks whose hands were turning differently. They could hear someone walking around upstairs when no one was there. They could hear doors opening and closing. And then that carried to my childhood home. And we hadn't had it previously, as far as I know.
So you started having the poltergeist phenomenon after their abduction, their initial remembered abduction event. Is that correct?
It was sometime after that. I don't know if the first time was when I was 17 or not. I tried to narrow that down. But we did start to have strange things happen in the house. It sounded like a baby crying, doors opening and closing. My My father was a Boy Scout leader. He was having a committee meeting one night when this happened in front of everybody. The door opened and no one was there. The cat walked in and it closed.
Wow, that's Vince. That's creepy. Yeah, because I've had some situations like that too. Like Greg and I, we had not about a year after we met, something like that. We had one summer. I may have told you a little bit about this. Forgive me if I have, but one summer, I was having UFO sightings in the same area almost every night for 2 months. And finally, I taught Greg one night. We were closing down where we were our department where we worked at the time together, and I had him come out there, and he saw it himself. He saw it too. This UFO, and long story short, later on he went home, and that night we had my bathroom door shutting by itself. I mean, it's just a lot of paranormal phenomenon. I think there's several possibilities here. I think it might be a mixture of a lot of things. It might be PK. Maybe it's been activated in some special way by the non-human entities. It could be sometimes this could be some sort of a trickster or demonic thing in disguise. There are some researchers out there that are looking at that hardcore right now. And then sometimes it seems like that there's some kind of physical person or being. It seems that I see a lot of possibilities here with this situation.
Yes, it's all one grand mystery, and we don't have all the answers.
It is. Vince, would you like to take some questions for our guest?
Well, I did have one question. So the title of your book, Forbidden Knowledge,
Yes.
you know, I took that to mean taking in what you talked about in it, and then what I've heard other people experiencing is that we're this knowledge is out there, but it seems that we're being stopped from learning about it on a wider scale, either we're discouraged or we're stopped from from learning about it. Why do you think that is? Like, who benefits from us not having this knowledge? Like, why would they want to stop us from, learning about something that I personally think is natural, just begins to explain why we're here and what our destiny is? Why do you think that that's something that you have forces that want to stop this?
Well, initially, the U.S. government was deeply involved in the study of psychic phenomena, in remote viewing, and whenever the government is secretly doing something, they make it taboo for everyone else. In January of 1953, the CIA-funded Robertson panel met and made the decision that they should attempt to persuade the American public that UFOs do not exist, and to ridicule anyone who made a credible report. And the excuse that they used was that public hysteria, and also that they said if there was a preemptive strike against the United States by the Soviet Union, that Soviet sympathizers in the United States would be calling up, clogging the lines with UFO reports. It didn't make sense to me, but that was one excuse. Yeah. They had scientists such as Dr. Donald Menzel using logical deduction rather than speaking of any kind of evidence in order to dissuade the public from any interest in this topic. And they had a ridicule program that was horrendous for many years. I saw this in my aunt and uncle's home, especially when I lived with Betty after Barney passed away at age 46. The things that were done to her in a psychological operation were horrible. No one should be subjected to that. And she and Barney wanted to keep their story confidential. It was only made public as the result of a violation of confidentiality. Yet, her house was entered and very weird things were carried out to try to freak her out, to try to push her over the edge so that they could further ridicule her or discredit her completely. And I'm angry about that. I've studied enough about this. I've read the correspondence files of these disinformants who worked on this federal program, and what they did to people should not have been permitted.
In my humble opinion, it violates our constitutional rights, period.
It certainly violates our civil rights and social justice.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And also basic humanity too. That's just harassing somebody to where they get sick or mentally ill is not that's not a human thing to do.
Sounds like something Richard Doty would have been involved with a little bit. Yeah,
it was. I know Phil Klass was deeply involved in what happened with Betty and Barney. Man. He started in 1966. That's when he went in, working nearly full time as a disinformant.
Wow. But I tell you what, that is just, it never ceases to amaze me how far the federal government will go to keep. I mean, we have a right to national security, keeping secret, but this UFO situation, I think, doesn't fall in with that. I think we have a right to know. Any files that does not have any national security significance of any kind, I think everything should be released. I'm hoping that that's what's going on. I'm hoping that they're moving in that direction, for sure.
Well, as long as it doesn't cause public hysteria, then I'm all for that. And as they're doing now, the measured disclosure program, where they introduce a little bit of information at a time, and that's important. I'm very much in favor of what they are doing now, and am willing to help them in any way if I can help them to understand more through the studies that I have taken part in for 32 years.
To sum everything up,
being the military, the only thing I worry about is they're approaching it like generals do, that they're saying, well, this could be a potential threat, instead of just putting the facts out there and letting people come to their own conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yes, that is a concern.
Yep. To sum everything up, Kathy, this book, the feeling I got when I was reading this book is that this is kind of like, is it fair to say this is kind of like a culmination of your life experience and research? Is that fair to say?
I think it is fair to say. And I want all of the listeners to know that in this book, I included 120 of our questions to the Council of Eight, and they're very specific answers. So I wanted to share that with everybody. That's fascinating. And I also talked about my own life as an experiencer that and I thought that I would go to my grave without talking about that, but I wrote of it in this book.
Yeah, and the details that you shared with your family, some of these were kind of personal. Your family went through a lot. You went through a lot. I remember reading. I remember you mentioned things about your aunt, not just your aunt and uncle, but your dad. And I think your mom was mentioned at some point. And it's just a very well written, well put together story of what I perceive as your life work.
Thank you so much. It's important to me.
Yeah, I also thought, I from my point of view, I loved some of the subjects that you got into that it resonated with me because it's, Mark and I have these same conversations, and it seemed like you were there listening to our conversations. When I read this, I'm like, oh, this is the same things that we talk about. So
all the time.
I really love the book. As a matter of fact, I like to reread things too, because sometimes I miss what I read before, and I anticipate getting deeper things from what you've written in your book. It's an excellent book.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks for allowing us to read it.
I put my heart and soul into it.
I think it looks like Mark. It looks like Mark froze up there.
Yes, it does look like.
Sorry, having a little technical issue here.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, that with all that's just what I kind of gathered from the book. It was very, very enjoyable, and I appreciate you sending them to us and coming back on the program. It's been wonderful having.
Well, thank you, and it's been a real pleasure for me to discuss the book with you and to hear what you know about all of this as well. I'm really glad that people are getting together from various disciplines and sharing knowledge now, instead of saying, oh, that's UFO, that's paranormal. There's always been that overlap, and it's time for everyone to put their heads together. If we didn't do that, we would never have the answers that we're looking for.
That's right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Kathy, it's been so awesome having you back, and I appreciate you coming back to tell us about your new book. And could you give our listeners the information of where to go to buy this book? What's the best way to get it?
Well, you can just go to Amazon.com. It's available as an ebook or a soft cover book. Or if you'd like an autographed copy, you can go to Kathleen-Marden, Marden, and you can purchase a book via PayPal. You can also read where I'll be speaking this year. There are links there and some articles that you can read too. And if you're having this negative contact in your life, ways to attempt to rid yourself of that. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, and I hope that you have a blessed evening, and thank you for being with us. You are listening to Forbidden Knowledge on Project Stargate. I'm your host, Mark Brenner. Have a great day.